establishing the National Institute of African American Health, NIAAH, a first of its kind organization dedicated to addressing these disparities and the social determinants of health. As an esteemed speaker on this crucial subject, which you will hear in a moment, and a respected medical school associate professor, Dr. Hall enjoys sharing his experiences and shedding light on the undeniable racial health disparities faced by the African American community through the publication of an insightful blog articles and by hosting, this is interesting, the enlightening Better Black Health podcast. So without further ado, let me introduce to some and present to all Dr. Greg Hall. Amen.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm happy to be here. I always, before I speak, and I speak a lot. I was in Philadelphia, I was in Chicago, but I say a little prayer, thanking God for the opportunity to have your ears, and that maybe it might improve somebody in here's health just a little bit. And if it improves your health, men are still, it's a secret sometimes, but we're still head of the family, right? And they can't change that. We're still head of the family. So when we start doing things, people are watching, children are watching, teens are watching, adult kids are watching what we do. So you can't tell someone while you smoke a cigarette to stop smoking. That's a waste of energy, right? You can't, with a drink in your hand, say stop drinking. We all know that, right? And so by example is how men lead, right? And so it's important to have that. So let's look at these slides here, and I'll go forward. So I'll point to the clock. I've got instructions here. Let's see if that works. Let's see. It worked last night, right? Oh, there I am. Okay, it's just going slow. All right, so I'm starting with the quiz. All right, so if you can see this, this is life expectancy. So if you feel like you're in class for a minute, you're going to see some charts, but you'll follow me. So just kind of go with it, right? The life expectancy by race or ethnicity, okay? So it's between blacks, whites, Hispanic Latino Americans, and Asian Americans, okay? And so one life expectancy is 75, one's 79, one's 82, and one's 86. Life expectancy, right? So who's 75? Does anyone not think it's black people? Raise your hand. Well, I'm sorry for you. it's black people. So I'm gonna go to the other end. Who's 86? We got a smart group here, right? Who's 82? White. And then who's 79? Hispanic Latino. Okay, well, you're almost there. It's actually, I'm going to struggle with this advancer. I can tell already. I have a lot of slides, and I can't advance it. There it is, yeah. So blacks are 75. White people is 79. Hispanic Latinos 82, and Asian Americans are 86. And so when I was young, I thought minorities had bad outcomes, and the majority, white people, had the best health outcomes. But that's not true. Minorities, Asian Americans, are doing better than white people. Hispanic Latinos are doing better than white people in terms of life expectancy. And so when I took the job at the Cutler Center for Men, I said, there's health disparities with white men, right? And we'll look at some of that going forward. And so it's important that minorities, when I kind of push back on minority health and minority this and minority that, because some minorities are doing way better than us. And so that's why I started the National Institute for African American Health, so we know who we're working with, right? And at UH, the UH Center for African American Health, so our health disparity issues are different from Asian American health disparity issues, which are related to language. Even the diseases that we get are different as well. So it's important that we sort of think about how that works. So this is how people kind of drop off, and you can kind of look at that, but I'll basically say that at 80% of Asian American women are alive. Isn't that amazing? At age 80, 80% are alive. And if you look at 57% of African American women, 57% are alive at 80. Whereas 70% of Asian American men, that's almost 3/4, are alive at 80. And then 39% of African American men are alive at 80. And none of them were in the Hall family. I've yet to have a man in the Hall family live beyond 80. So we have a lot of health burden just in my family as well. And so, but comparatively, we see that. Now, what's our disadvantage? You say, what's the difference? You see at the top, cardiovascular disease. We have more cardiovascular disease. We've got more cancer. And then look at the bottom in terms of where is there an advantage? We have less suicides. We have less unintentional injuries, which is accidental overdoses and things of that nature, right? And so looking at this is heart disease. The top, you don't have to read the small print. The top line is us, way away from the crowd, right? The significant difference in cardiovascular, that's heart attack, stroke, right? And then here it is, suicide rate. Look at where the arrow is. That's African American. So with all of our burden and all the stress, all the things needing to go to a mission, all the premature death, we still have a lower suicide rate, right? And that's what does that speak to? That speaks to our resilience amid a controversy. So it's really something. So let's look at the leading cause of death for men. And don't lose you, but the number one cause of death from 1 to 20 is, what does that say? Homicide. The number one cause of death from 1 to 20. What's the number one cause from then 20 to 44? Homicide. So your number one, my sons, 3 sons in their 20s, their number one risk for death is homicide, is getting killed. That's not everyone else's number one. It's not even on the list for Asian Americans or even Hispanic Latinos or whites. And then, so it ends up being the 4th leading cause of death overall, homicide. So we've got to look at that, right? Now this is, and I'm just the facts, people. That's why I show you, if you look at these, there's references that show you I'm not making up any of this stuff. It's all stuff I got from somewhere else, right? So this is the lifetime risk of being killed by the police, right? Who's that big top bar? African Americans. And then who's next? Native Americans. And then Hispanic Latinos, then the overall average, and then white people have less, and then look at Asian American, Pacific Islanders, their risk for being killed by the police. And when I first looked at this, I did not see the little orange part on the right-hand side, which is females. You all see that? Yeah. So what's the risk for a black female to be killed by the police? It's microscopic. You all see it up there? I didn't see it the first time I looked. So the police have a magical ability to not kill women. Right? And I can say it here. I know some mean black women, right? So if they could kill some black men like they are, a couple of them could have got shot, right? But they don't do that, right? And forgive me, Lord. But they don't, right? And so that means it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So African Americans, the worst outcomes as it relates to cardiovascular disease, the worst outcomes as it relates to diabetes, worse. And if you look at those numbers, it's way higher. Look at Asian Pacific Islands, 17 per 100,000. Look at African Americans, 50, right? Over 3 times as many. So way higher, right? And then the worst cancers, if you could think of a cancer, it's not up there: lung, breast, ovarian, cervical, colon, prostate. The worst outcomes in all of those cancers. And so when you look at lung cancer, and I just put a little square around the black just so you can see it, it's coming down because people are stopping smoking, but we still have the worst outcomes. Looking at colon cancer, it's coming down, but still African Americans far away, worse. And prostate cancer, same thing. We're way away from the group. But it's coming down, but not coming down enough, right? And so what drives these health disparities, these health differences that I'm showing you when we're way away from the pack? What drives that? And so some say insurance, but since Obamacare, we've covered a lot more people, so insurance is not as much of an issue. Now it's a matter of having good insurance versus not so good insurance. And I would not say there exists good insurance. Dr. Haney could tell you, but so that's less of an issue. There's genetic and epigenetic issues. Like in my family, there's a gene that gives us high blood pressure that leads to premature kidney failure. And so I had 2 uncles die in their 30s from kidney failure. My brother died in his 40s from kidney failure. So that's a genetic, it's a gene that the Hall family has. And so there's other black, and it's a gene that kind of comes from Africa. So there are genetic and then epigenetic things. They're patient-related. People, you smoke, you don't eat. We had potato chips, you know what I'm saying? I had them too. There's things that we do. We don't exercise and things of that nature. Providers and healthcare, just system-related things, things that University Hospital does and Cleveland Clinic does and Metro Health does that drives health disparities, unbeknownst to them, I would like to think, right? And then there's oppression, all right? That's just living like this, like we do, living as a second-class citizen, if you feel that way. Police following you in the record store. Who remembers being followed in the record store while the white people were stealing stuff, right? And they're following us around. But that's oppressive, right? And so if you oppress rats or mice and other rats and mice, you treat them nice, the oppressed rats and mice die sooner. So this oppression can take, it's like stress, can take a toll on your health. And so this was a study that was done that looked at how people felt about trust overall, right? And this study found that compared to whites, African Americans are more likely to report low trust in healthcare providers. And it's actually over 40%. So it's almost half of the people we see don't trust doctors, don't trust hospitals, don't trust medicine. And that's a thing, right? And then this looked at when you have race discord, in other words, you're doctors of a different race than you, of an African Americans, they objectively recorded those and measured them and said, there's less small talk, there's less involvement in decision-making, group decision-making, there's less everything, right, objectively, when you have that discord. And whereas, I feel a connection when I see African American patients, and that special connection may remind me of my brother, or remind me of my cousin, or remind me of someone I grew up with, or whatever, and then you get a little bit sort of different care based on that, or at least a more warm and fuzzy discussion when you come in, right? And so they said that these discordant things make a difference, right? And so Robert Wood Johnson said, black adults report being discriminated against or unfairly judged by healthcare providers and their staff at a rate of almost 3 times higher than whites and twice as high than Hispanic Latinos. And so that's a widespread. So if you feel that way, you're one of those people, right? And so how do we get there? A lot of times we know, but we don't sort of connect the dots in terms of how we got there. And so let's look at where we've been. So I show a lot of these things because I didn't know them. I didn't know it. And I'm like 50 years old and not knowing this. And so I admit things I don't know because there's other people who probably didn't know like I didn't know. And so it's worth pointing out, I kind of knew the first English colony Americans came to Jamestown, the United States in 1607. What I didn't know until 2019 was that African Americans came in 1619, 12 years later, right? We came 12 years after the white Americans discovered America, right? So it's like the back to Africa, that really, really, really doesn't apply to us because we've been here when it's 400 years the whole time. We've been here the whole time. And in 2019, they were talking about 400 years, and I'm like, 400, I just got past me, all right? I was reading medical stuff. I didn't know. But we've been here the whole time, right? And it was like, almost like they went back, oh, we can't do this alone. We got to go back and get some help, right? And that's when we proceeded to build the Capitol and all the things that made it what it was. And so Jim Crow laws, when they talk about Jim Crow, there were laws, right? And so they separate but equal. Some of you remember this. I remember it occurred when I was alive, right? Facilities for blacks, facilities for whites. There's people, when I speak to people, they look at me like all crazy, like, what? Yeah, right? And so this is, we went to a family reunion, and one of the days of the family reunion, they made us go to the International Civil Rights Museum in Greensboro. I'm trying to get away from health disparities and all that. I really didn't want to go. I'm going to tell you all honestly, but I did it because my wife made me go, right? And so, but in this thing, we saw this Coke machine that had 2 sides. It sat in a wall, so it would sit in like in a bus station, and it would sit in the wall, and it had a white side and a black side, right? And so it would sit in the wall, and then one side the black waiting room would have their side, and the white waiting room would have their side. But the people that designed it so it had a price difference on both sides. They charged us more, but the part that really blew my mind was they adjusted the compressor so that the black side Coke wasn't as cold as the white side Coke. They went to the trouble of making sure the temperature wasn't the same. So that's the disdain, and that's a very soft word, you know what I mean, that whoever designed this had for black people. But it just shows, you know, some things like this just shows granularly what the problem really was, right? So we had colored sections, and my father talked about watching movies in the balcony because we couldn't sit on the floor. But my father, the eternal optimist like me, said, you look straight at the screen. We liked it up there. We had to eat in the kitchen in the restaurants, but he said, they gave us seconds, more portions. You know, they treat the black people in there cooking, right? So he found the bright side of all those things, but these things existed, right? And so redlining also, they did actually redline places to exclude black people and to surround neighborhoods they were going to disadvantage and then advantage the areas that were outside. And so this is how suburbs were made, and the suburbs were made specifically to be exclusive of people of color, right? And so this was in Boston. Then the legislation, see the black guy on the upper left-hand, not upper left-hand, but you know, near the upper left-hand corner, he was a Harvard grad lawyer, and he moved into a white neighborhood in Baltimore, right? And that set off the world, right? I mean, they lost, like to lose their mind. And so the mayor at the time started a legislation, passed a law, right, that said no Negro may take up residence within a block within the city limits of Baltimore wherein there are more than a certain number of white people. So this legislation, these were the laws. You couldn't live, black people could only live in a black neighborhood. White people could only live in the white neighborhood. And if you were going to build a building, you had to say who the building was for, right? I'm going to build this building in a black neighborhood, and it's for black people. So that was part of the legislation. And so I showed, they said, we need to think about Barry Mahul, because that was him. That's the guy who started that. That was the mayor. Blacks should be quarantined to isolated areas in order to reduce the incidence of civil disturbance, to prevent the spread of communicable diseases into nearby white neighborhoods, and to protect the property values among the white majority. That's 1910, right? So this was not just some hooded person, you know, running around. This was the mayor of Baltimore. And so these redlining led to devaluation, which led to housing decline, which led to foreclosures and vacancies. That's asset loss, right? Increased crime and safety. And so I grew up in Glenville. So my father's house was on East Boulevard, and his house was worth $19,000, right? So that's nothing for me to inherit. That same house in Cleveland Heights is $250,000, right? Or Shaker Heights is $300,000, because we had 3 floors in the basement, bathroom, you know, it was a big house, but it was worthless because of where it was, right? And so the people are able to sell their houses and then that pay their kids college tuition. I had student loans because nobody was able to sell anything and pay for my student loan. So all that sets me behind an equivalent person who has a home in these suburbs that my ancestors weren't allowed to even think about buying, right? And so all that leads to increased poverty, inferior schools, and poor health. I know you were wondering when I was going to get back to health, but that leads to poor health, right? And so the social and financial advancement in the United States depended on public policy-driven racial segregation. Public policy, again, not hooded people, things that the government did, right? Whether it was local government or not. And so these were the things. Racism, like what race you were, was the cause, right? Because there are people today that don't believe racism is a public health risk, right? We voted on that recently at the Board of Health, and one person said, no, racism is not a public health risk, right? So that's 2024, right? Or 2023 at the time. And so there are people that don't believe this, right? And then if you try to educate them, their ears close up, right? Even though it's anatomically not possible, right? So the trust, what about the trust of African Americans in healthcare? We know, we started there, we know about the Tuskegee syphilis study, right? And so I'm not gonna go through it, but it was okay when it started in 32 because there was no cure for syphilis. But in 42, when it came out with penicillin, there was a cure, then it was wrong to not give the people the cure for a problem, right? So that's like having COVID going around, and we developed a medicine for it, but we're gonna see how COVID does in black people and not give them the treatment. So it's something equivalent to that. And so it wasn't until 1972 that the New York Times really just outed them and said what they were doing, and that's when they finally stopped the study. Okay? So again, if you say, well, who remembers that? That was a long time ago. 80% of African Americans know about it compared to like 30% of whites. So there's a lot of people that don't know this ever happened, and some people kind of know it wrong. They were injecting syphilis in people and trying to say things that are wrong. And so this is what, this is an earned distrust of public health. This was the United States public health that was doing this. Like my board of health, it was us doing this. It wasn't, again, a board of people running around in white sheets. It was the US public health system. J. Marion Sims, the father of gynecology, that's why he's got a statue in Central Park, or had one, and also down south, he basically perfected his surgical techniques on unanesthetized slave girls. And so gynecology, right? So he was doing the surgery in the most sensitive body, most sensitive place in a woman's body without anesthesia. And doing it over, yeah, he did surgery, gynecologic surgery on black women slaves without anesthesia, over and over. And because he was such the scientist, he documented the exact surgery that he did, the exact slave girl that he did it on, the outcomes, did it get better, did it get worse, and continued it over and over again. And so they actually are talking about, because of the documentation, there's a particular slave that he tortured repeatedly that said she needs a statue in Central Park. And not so much as him, because at the time it was not illegal to do this. But what did the slaves think of this so-called doctor, right? What did they think? And so, again, articles are now coming out about that. And then grave robbing. I didn't know anything about this, but when he had to my son started medical school, now he's working on a cadaver, a dead body that he's dissecting right now. And so where did they get cadavers from in the old days? I never knew. I never really thought about it, to be honest with you. Apparently, they would steal the bodies from black cemeteries and Potter Fields, poor people's cemeteries. And so imagine having your mother, your father, your sister, your brother die. You have a service for them, you bury them, and you go back a week later, and someone's dug them up and taken them away. And you know who dug them up and took them away. It's the medical school down the street. They knew who was doing it. It was just not worth chasing after medical students stealing bodies for cadavers, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. So it was widespread, right? And so when you look at article after article of how they talked about stealing these graves, they found in the bottom of medical schools these skulls that they could tell are of African American descent that were dissected, and back then there was no system for donating your body to a medical school. So when they dig up the old medical schools to build a new medical school, they find this cemetery of bodies in the basement that how they get here, who knows, right? And so that's been going on for many, many years. So this, I thought, was fascinating. Grandison Harris, the grave robber, enslaved and then employed by Georgia Medical College. If you look in the back, that's Grandison Harris. Who better to get into a cemetery day or night to steal a body than a black person, right? There's always one, right? And the thing is that looking at the people in the first row and the second row, you all know that man in the back would not be in a graduation picture if he was not central to their education. right? I mean, just look at those guys. I mean, you know he wouldn't be in that picture. This guy, he got the bodies. He's the one that dug them up. And there's this whole story about how strong he was, that you didn't mess with him because he could pull a body out of the ground. Now in the 70s, or the 60s, this guy fell off a 3-foot wall, 3 feet, yardstick high, hit his head, was unconscious, went to the hospital, and they transplanted his heart. Heart transplant. No permission from his family, no notification. Within 24 hours, he's gone. And so who knew that this guy fell, hit his head, and within a day he was dead and they transplanted his heart? His coworkers knew that. His family knew that. His neighbors knew that. They all knew. And so how does the black community think about that hospital? What do they think about agreeing to transplants? What do they think? All these things, it's because of this stuff. When I talked to people when I was a resident, so-and-so, can they donate their, no, you're just trying to steal their organs. And I'm thinking, well, why would I ain't even thinking about that. You know what I'm saying, right? But because Greg Hall didn't know, he was stupid. I didn't know about all this. They knew, right? And so that's what we're up against in terms of healthcare, right? The trust issues. And unfortunately, I could go on and on about these things as it relates to this, right? And so the American Medical Association had to finally apologize for how they treated black doctors. And so I was born at Forest City Hospital. Who remembers Forest City Hospital? You got a lot of you guys. There was a Forest City Hospital because, I hate to say it, University Hospital, Mount Sinai, St. Luke's, Cleveland Clinic did not allow black and other doctors of color. That's why we had to have a Forest City Hospital, right? So there are black people that were born at Mount Sinai, and why were they born at Mount Sinai? Because they had a white doctor, or a Jewish doctor, right? They had a non-black doctor. If they had a black doctor, delivered me was S.Q. Crawford. Who remembers S.Q. Crawford? Yeah, so he was a black doctor. He was at Forest City, right? And so the AMA said, okay, that was wrong. We discriminated not just against black people, but black doctors, and that goes downhill. And they even said, last year, they said, we're still trying to deal with that trust issue. That's why there's a National Medical Association and an American Medical Association, because the National Medical Association had to capture the blacks and Hispanic Latinos that were excluded by the American Medical Association. So these prior mistreatments are firmly ground into our collective memory as African Americans, right? And so that's why we don't like doctors, we don't like hospitals, we don't like medicine, some of us, right? And so that's why we have to kind of get to the point where we can get behind it, right? So you see articles about mistrust and whatnot. So this low trust leads to, you're not trusting my medicine, you're not trusting this, you're not trusting that, you're not trusting the hospital. And some of that is leading to this big gap between how long black people live and how long Asian Americans live. Because we are all human, and we are all 99.999% the same. So there should not be a generational gap between how long we live, right? We have much more hypertension, way more heart disease, and on and on. And we have this higher risk, twice as likely to have a sudden cardiac death at an earlier age. Who knew that African American at 45 is 5 times as likely to experience an intracerebral hemorrhage, which is like an aneurysm rupture? 5 times as high, right? And so when we think about, I think about Stephanie Tubbs Jones, who died a year back in her 50s, in her prime, aneurysm rupture, right? You look at Jamie Foxx, who's come back, right? But many people are saying that was a stroke, right? And then Sinbad, oh my goodness, seeing him, and Luther Vandross and John Singleton. These men are having brain problems related presumably to hypertension and presumably to the fact that it's not controlled. I'm just saying presumably because I don't know. I wasn't their doctor. I wouldn't be talking about them if I was, right? And so, but that just kind of makes it real to you that these people who had a lot of money and a lot of influence, but also a whole lot of mistrust in medicine and doctors that we all earned, doctors earned that distrust over these centuries that I talked about, but it's cost them, may have cost them their lives. And so hypertension is the problem. High blood pressure is the problem. And so being able to bring your blood pressure, a blood pressure like that's up there is the problem. High blood pressure leads to stroke, heart attack, kidney problems, all those things. And so when you have somebody 48, 50 years old, so-and-so dropped dead out of the clear blue sky, I'm not thinking this clear blue sky. I'm thinking this person's had high blood pressure for 20 years. It's a silent killer. They have no idea. They didn't check their blood pressure. When they did check it, they attributed it to something else. Oh, I was in pain. I was this. I was that. And so it didn't get treated, and then your body finally couldn't take it, and they died at 50, which is young, right? And so that's why we have to be aware of this and try to internalize it, right? And diabetes and smoking also contributed. And so a lot of us have high blood pressure, and we want to be able to, that's the way we can decrease these cardiovascular events the easiest. That's how we decrease our stroke risk, our heart attack risk, our heart failure risk, our kidney failure risk, all by having a normal blood pressure. And so many times I'll have people come in with high blood pressure, and they say, why do I have high blood pressure? Why? Well, 3 out of 5, 75% of black men and black women have high blood pressure, compared to 55% of white men and 40% of white women at age 55, So it's very prevalent, 3 out of 4. So when I see someone with high blood pressure, it's no surprise. It's more of a surprise to see a black person with a normal blood pressure. But they're out there, right? And they're probably not coming to me. But this study showed that 1/3 of black men at 30 have high blood pressure, right? So 1, 2, you have high blood pressure. 3, 4, you have high blood pressure at 30, right? And so this study said, we've got to really start looking at our younger men, checking their blood pressure, and getting them on treatment so they don't have a heart attack 20 years later, right? And so what can we do now? All this depressing information. What can we do about it? Getting exercise, and that doesn't necessarily mean sweating and everything, but it does mean walking. How many steps? Everyone has a smartphone that's counting your steps, whether you know it or not, right? It's counting them. Whether you turn the app on or not, it's counting them, right? And so if you can get between 8,000 and 10,000 before age 60 a day, that's ideal. And over 60, it's 6,000 to 8,000 steps a day. So that's how you do it. You're going to do it in 7 days and average, like some day you may get 11,000, 12,000, the other days you only get 4. However you do it, but it should be average that out. So turn that app on, see how much you're walking, and start walking more, right? It'll measure all kinds of things. In terms of sleep, most people are not getting adequate sleep. And so, again, if you're under 60, 7 to 8 hours, under 60, it's 7 to 9 hours, over 60, 7 to 8 hours. And so you can get too much sleep. Too much sleep will drain you. This is a U shape. That means that someone sleeping 10, 11 hours a night, that's not good for them, right? Because they don't have the time to walk all those steps they need to walk or whatever, right? But you can't, there's bad outcomes associated with too much sleep, and there's bad outcomes associated with too little sleep. And I see too little sleep a lot. And those people that have poor sleep, they have chronic pain, they have depression, they have anxiety, because they're not getting enough sleep. And so whatever we can do to try to help that is important. Meals, we need to have a balanced meal that includes grains and fruits and vegetables and protein, and you see the proportion. So it's not like half the plate is meatloaf and gravy, right? And a little dollop of mashed potatoes and nothing green. My father used to say, you got to have something green on your plate. But I would frequently fix a plate that didn't have anything green on it, right? And then I'd find something green to put on there. But now we know that there's a lot to this, right? Measure your blood pressure. It's $35 at Target. You get a machine. I measure everyone's blood pressure. I was having out people at my house Friday night, and I pull the thing out. They're like, oh, you know what? And I check everybody's blood pressure. Oh, I'm fine. My blood pressure is great. Show me. Show me what your blood pressure is. Right? I love you. That's why you're here. So show me what your blood pressure is. You're calm. It's not white coat, because I don't have my white coat on. Right? And so measure your people at the kitchen table. Measure their blood pressure. Measure your blood pressure. Measure your wife's blood pressure. Measure your daughter's blood pressure. Measure your son's blood pressure. because they think they're invincible just like we thought we were invincible. So please do that. Get a primary care doctor. There's too many people that go to the ER for care. They are not good at prevention. They weren't designed to do prevention. They're designed to fix gunshot wounds, heart attacks, sew-up stabbings. They weren't designed, so they don't check your cholesterol, right? They're not checking your PSA to see what your prostate level is. So get a primary care doctor. And presumably, as I put there, black people live longer under the care of a black doctor. Who thinks I'm exaggerating? No one up there. And I pulled all these articles because it says in counties with more black doctors, black people live longer. Astounding study finds, right? Astounding. Study shows blacks served by black doctors live longer. But we all knew that, right? But unfortunately, there's some black people that don't know that. And I'm not saying leave your doctor if you love your doctor. I'm not saying leave them, but you may want to get a second opinion every now and then, make sure they're doing the right things. Because I've had black men who have gone to primary care doctors and they've never checked a PSA, their prostate-specific antigen that measures their risk for prostate cancer, because the black doctor thinks you're Asian and you have a low risk for prostate cancer. Or they treat you like you're white and you have a low risk for prostate cancer. But you're black and you have a high risk for prostate cancer, but they don't apply that because they're treating all their patients the same. And that's not good. You don't need to be treated the same. If that makes sense. All right? So we talked about the Cutler Center for Men, and what we want to do is diagnose things earlier, prevent disease, intervene appropriately, and then tailor the experience so that men feel more comfortable, right? And so you're having a primary care doctor. They're not treating you like women. There's no knitting or anything. There's probably anything. I knew Rosie Greer used to knit or crochet or whatever, right? So I'm not talking about you guys. But they try to make it so men are more comfortable coming to the doctor and having a doctor. And I think everyone deserves, particularly African Americans, because we have so much disease burden, everyone deserves a doctor. So if you have a nurse practitioner, and my loving wife is a nurse practitioner. I'm not trying to disparage nurse practitioners, but they were trained for specific things. And I don't think they were trained to treat black people with all this disease burden, right? And so everyone deserves a physician and to care for their health and oversee what they do and what not. So the things to do, I'm at the home stretch here, and we'll do all the questions too. Get screened appropriately. Check your blood pressure like we talked about. Have them screen your cholesterol level, your lipid panel. They don't do that in the ER or the urgent care. Just find out if it's high, you can have a heart attack or stroke because of that. And that can run in the families as well. Get your hemoglobin A1C checked, which screens you for diabetes. Sometimes, you're up peeing all the time and you think it's your prostate, and in reality, you have diabetes undiagnosed. And sometimes diabetes can be undiagnosed for 2 years before you end up in front of a physician. Right? Before you go to the ER and you're about to fall out. And they say, oh, it's diabetes. You thought it was just getting old, right? Colonoscopy. Get colon cancer is very prevalent, highest cause of death in black people. Get that, or get the Cologuard, whatever. But get colon cancer screened as you can. And then your PSA, don't just sit back and say, yeah, well, they check your PSA. If you happen to have one of those doctors that's not checking a PSA, ask them to check a PSA and know what your number is, right? So that you can know whether it's high or low or safe or whatever. Okay, so we have unique nutritional needs, even amongst ourselves, and we can see salt sensitivity is very, very common, particularly in African Americans because of a gene, again, that's based on Africa, and it's a whole nother talk, but that's really impacting our high blood pressure burden and things of that nature. Vitamin D deficiency is widespread, and vitamin D deficiency, this person wonders if vitamin D deficiency in African Americans contributes to our health disparities. So I'm not just trying to get you on amlodipine or losartan or atorvastatin. Take some vitamin D. I don't need to prescribe it. You need 2,000 international units a day, because people with normal vitamin Ds have a lower prostate cancer risk, decreased colon cancer, decreased breast cancer, better blood pressure control, lower diabetes risk, and stronger immunity. And what do we have? We have the highest risk for diabetes. Most African Americans, almost 80%. And when I check it, I'm surprised when I see a normal vitamin D. So that's something you can do aside from the doctor to do that. And so you want to be able to take vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, magnesium, and potassium. Those are the vitamins that you probably should take unless you had a perfect diet. If you had a perfect diet with salmon and mushrooms and all that stuff, you still need vitamin D, right? But if you had a lot of fruit and vegetables, you may not need the C. You may not need zinc if you eat a lot of mushrooms and things of that nature, nuts and whatnot. But that's what you should take. But there's also some things that you shouldn't take. You shouldn't take calcium, you shouldn't take vitamin E, and you shouldn't take selenium. Who's ever heard that before? Got one in the back, a couple people, right. Because, looking at calcium, this is again the quotes, and you see the reference at the bottom, that calcium intake has been positively associated with prostate cancer in most epidemiologic studies. Right, calcium, right? And so some people think that lactose intolerance is kind of a sign that you shouldn't be taking calcium. You know, we shouldn't be getting the Lactaid and getting the milk other kind of way. It means like if you're intolerant of it, you probably shouldn't have it. You see what I'm saying? It may not be good for you, and that's kind of been out there a while. And vitamin E, right? And I say, you know, don't take my word for any of this. This is why I put all these references from the American Cancer Society, Prostate Cancer Foundation, Medscape, WebMD, Mayo Clinic, all say, it's not in big bold print and it's not across the top of the page, but they all say those quotes there that vitamin E has been associated in a big study that was done in 2011 with an increased risk for prostate cancer, an increased risk for more aggressive prostate cancer. So it's not a big deal for Asian Americans. Why? Because they have a low risk for prostate cancer. But who is it a big deal for? Us, because we already, without all this, we have a high risk for prostate cancer. So you want to make sure you avoid, I looked in my medicine cabinet, there's a great big thing of vitamin E my wife got. I'm like, oh, she's trying to kill me, you know. So, but I didn't know, and she didn't know, right? And many of you didn't know, so now you know, right? That's what's important. So it's not to be self-serving, but I designed a multivitamin designed specifically for African Americans that has the right amount of those things, but I'm not here to sell that. But I felt like it'd be wrong to not tell you, and people have cussed me out for not telling them, so there that is. We started with the help of Cecil and Lipscomb in the back and United Black Fund. We were able to start the National Institute for African American Health, which was mentioned in the intro. It actually helps, thank you, it actually helps mentor pre-med students, black pre-med students, not minority medical pre-med students, black pre-med students and black medical students to try, now they reverse affirmative action, to try to get them into medical school and out of medical schools, they can be around to help us with our health, right? And then if you want more information, drgreghall.com is my website. I write articles on all this. I did an article on erectile dysfunction, and it's blown up. It's blown up. There's the picture of the book. I do have a podcast called Better Black Health, over 40 episodes. We talk to patients that have had specific things, and we talk to specialists, doctors that are specialists that treat those things and try to improve everyone's health and education about all of these different issues, all making sure it's fact-based, it's not made up, it's trying to make the world a better place. And so with that, I will finally take questions. This gentleman here.
I've got a relative that his movie bill, I think it's headquartered, is high on his blood test. And he's trying to treat it with milk thistle. That's an herb. Because they do a lot of, supposedly they do a lot of that in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Does that have any validity at all?
Well, I don't know anything about that. And so I think it's important to talk about what you know about and not talk about what you don't know about. I don't know about milk thistle, and I don't know about his bilirubin, and I also don't know all the different things that are going on with him. But what I say is, if there was something wrong with your fuse box in your house, right, sparks are coming out of it, and you called an electrician over, because everyone in here would, right? An electrician said, you need a new fuse box. Are you going to go to YouTube and read about fuse box? And you know what I mean? Are you going to read an article about replacing the fuse box? No. You're either going to trust the electrician or you're going to find an electrician you trust, right? And so as it relates to your health, if you're not spending time reading about milk thistle and interactions and things like that, then you need to find someone you trust and ask them. And then either take their advice or leave them and find someone else you trust. Because treating your health that way is I don't want to say it's never good, but it's rarely. You can't read an article and, oh, they're doing that in Europe. And I'm not talking about them, but I am. You know what I'm saying? They would not apply that to anything else important in their life. Like fuse box, right? Or electrical plug, right? These things are simple. So if you wouldn't apply that to something in your house, you wouldn't apply that to your health. You'd find someone you trust. No, thank you. In the red.
You mentioned you seem to be emphasizing vitamin D. Now, I do take vitamin D 2,000 units, but my bottle says D3. Is that a difference?
Well, yeah, D3 is the one you want to take. There's a D2 and a D3, and D3 is the one you want to take.
One more thing. On the prior screen, you showed some bottles of vitamins. Now, in August, I was in Hoosier, and this doctor gave us a bottle of vitamins for men over 50. And I see it's the same bottle that you showed on the screen. Do you recommend that bottle of vitamins that the black doctor invented or made the next step?
I highly recommend that. Well, that's the one. Well, the reason why I highly recommend it is because I'm the guy that gave you those vitamins. I did. I can tell you where they are. Yes, sir. Yes.
What do you think about that commercial about they insert something in your chest and you don't have to use the machine?
I haven't had a patient do it yet. Reason why I read about sleep apnea, I have sleep apnea. So I know it personally. I go to sleep every night with a CPAP machine. And so I know all about sleep apnea more than I ever wish I could, right? And so what it does is you turn it on and off. It makes your diaphragm contract when you stop breathing. So when you sleep apnea means you stop breathing in the night. And so it basically measures the rhythm of your breathing, and when your diaphragm doesn't contract, it sends a little electrical impulse to make your diaphragm contract and make you breathe. So I just assume I got enough remote controls by my bed. I don't need it. I'm just not doing that. And I haven't had a patient who's had it that I can tell you, oh man, it's great or bad or anything. Yes, sir. Yes, it's a Cutler Center for Men, University Hospital's Cutler Center for Men, and it's free for you to join. I recommend that you join it because then you have we have patient navigators that will help you make an appointment, help you come to see me, help you get whatever I order. They'll help you get your CT scan screening done or whatever's done. They help do that. With any referrals I give you, they help with all those things. So it's a Cutler Center for Men, and I actually have a handout I can give you guys at the end for that. Yes, I am, but I'm booked out. But I am, so why not schedule now? Wait a minute, get the gentleman in the back. Lactose intolerant? Well, here's the thing. What lactate is milk with the enzyme that we don't have added to it, okay? And so the reason when we drink milk and it runs through us, that's lactose intolerant. You know, I'm not digesting it properly, right? When something runs through you, you're not digesting it properly, right? And so what lactate does is add the enzyme that we genetically lack so that we can enjoy milk or ice cream or whatever the lactate is. So those are all facts up to that point. So now I interviewed a geneticist who was trained at Harvard, a black geneticist, and she suggests that in Africa, people are lactose intolerant in Africa because there are no cows. And then the cows are not there because of the mosquitoes that were there. And so since there were no cows, people didn't drink milk, and they didn't need an enzyme to digest milk. And so this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And so if you don't need that, it's possible, she suggests, that calcium that causes prostate cancer, and that possibly the calcium that's causing these specific type of breast cancer, hormone-negative breast cancer, is because we're taking calcium and we're intolerant of that. You know, so being intolerant means it run through you, but also may mean you develop a cancer because of it. So that part is all hypothesis. I don't know that I can't say that that's been proven or anything, that because it's black health and people don't spend a lot of time and money on that, but it's kind of enough. It sort of makes sense to me. If you're intolerant of something, why should you cut a corner around it? If you know what I'm saying. So that's a suggestion. So now they've said, when they're speaking to Americans, that milk does a body good, right? And we need calcium, and people who don't drink milk don't have strong bones. We have strong bones even though we're lactose intolerant. You know, how is that, right? And so the people that don't ever drink milk, our body's still pretty good, you know, certainly at younger ages. And so, again, I think they're applying these recommendations to Americans. Most Americans are what? Yes. And so that's who the advice most applies to. I mean, I'm trying to be fair. Let's go back to Cecil. Right, and you asked about, what you eat. I mean, we are what we eat. I know Dr. Linda Bradley talks about it. If you see, you know, a loaf of white bread, you know, like we used to eat, you know, you could ball it up and be a ball. That's death. You know what I mean? She sees a skull and crossbones rather than the wonder sign, right? And so white bread we should not be eating white bread. There's no nutritional value. There's sugar added, you know, so it's like not good. So you know, high fiber. Bread, and so we have this struggle with hearkening back to our youth and all the good things that we ate, right, when we were young, and sometimes we want to go back to that to make ourselves feel good, but some of that stuff is killing us, right? My saintly mother made my father every morning before he went to work. I looked at his plate, I can see it right now, 2 eggs sunny side up, 2 pieces of bacon or 2 pieces of sausage, 2 pieces of white bread with the butter, and the butter didn't spread, it was chunked, and then jelly, grape jelly smudged on top of that. That was she was sending him off to work, but in reality she was trying to kill him, right? But that sounds good, doesn't it? But because that's what we grew up on. And I'll have that sometimes. But I know when I'm having it, it's terrible, but I have it for nostalgic reasons, and then I can't do it often. You can't eat that every day. You can't eat that every week. You can't eat it every month. But you can have it sometimes, and that's what's important. I'm going to go back over here with the beard. Well, they were giving you broad advice, right? And what was that broad advice aimed toward? Thank you. I'm not saying that. And so, but what she was saying in parentheses was to say something that's not going to shock your GI system, right? Say, have something bland, right? And so if you're going to connect with someone, you say, well, everybody knows white bread, you know, so she's not thinking about your nutritional status right now. She's just trying to get you to heal. And and so there's something bland that you could eat, but you know what bland things are. You've eaten bland things before. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what it is. I mean, noodles are the same thing. It's not rice is better than noodles, right? But we like noodles, spaghetti, all those things. Very, white grain. So if you can find something that has higher grain, seeds, nuts. And when we were put on this earth by God, right? We were designed to survive on nuts and beans and fruit and vegetables. That's what's there. And then if we got lucky, a fish, we might catch a fish. Or you might catch a rabbit. If you got lucky. You didn't get lucky every day. But every day was nuts, beans, fruit, and vegetables. That's what we're supposed to be eating. So if you're not doing that, and God gave us all we needed, wherever we were put. And so that's the sort of thing you want to think about. Am I doing that? Is my diet consistent with that? Very good. I'll go over here.
I really enjoyed what you spoke on, but I must tell you, I have a confession. I love my Honey Nut Cheerios. and I'm a hardcore vitamin D milk drinker. For the last probably 10 or 12 years, I've been at 2%. And I do get my PSA check, and it always come up for the night. But now, Pastor Corbis is trying to put the fair guide, and you put the fair guide. So what is it if I'm trying to continue to have good health? What supplements my routine of having like a cereal?
So, and here's the thing. I'm glad you made that point. You can look at me and tell I am not 100% African, right? Of Africa, I'm not 100%. I've got part. I always say Irish slave owner. I'm part Irish slave owner. I did the 23andMe, and I got 40-something% Irish and 50-something% African, Nigerian descent, right? And so the white part of me, I can drink milk too. I'm not lactose intolerant. I got sleep apnea, but I'm not lactose intolerant. So that white part maybe doesn't put me at increased risk, but I'm still scared that I'm going to get prostate cancer. And so milk is not that important to me, So that's why I don't make a point of not having it, but I don't make a point of having it, like that. So, it's the fact that you're tolerating the milk means that may not be a problem for you. What the lady was suggesting that I interviewed was that if you're lactose intolerant, that means you might be calcium intolerant, and that might be the problem. Okay? In the blue-green. Yeah, it's called the National Institute for African American Health, and if you go to their website, niaah.org, it'll say be a mentor or be a mentee. So if you want to become a doctor or something, you go in there and sign up to be a mentee, and then they'll assign you a doctor that will help you choose your classes, reinforce, build you up when it's hard, try to tell you about the things that they've experienced, in the past, and so. We're just trying to help mentor people because everyone doesn't have an uncle that's a doctor or a cousin that's a doctor that they can ask. And so we're trying to hook up people with black pre-med students with black doctors who can help them navigate and tell them, yeah, they did that to me. All the students they all had copies of the old exam. They didn't share it with me. All these things happen, right? And then we are disproportionately poor on standardized exams, right? Like the MCAT we use to get into medical school. And so we try to provide support for the students so they can pay for the MCAT, so they can pay for an MCAT review course that these other people have access to help. And so we're just trying to level the playing field as it relates, particularly since they reversed affirmative action. And so it's going to be really hard for us to get this next generation of black doctors going. Back to you. Yes, sir. Well, vitamins are vitamins, so they're not for anything. So I had a guy email me and said, I've been taking your vitamin for 3 months, and I don't feel nothing. And I was like, I've been taking them for 2 years and I don't feel anything either. But I haven't gotten sick, you know, but it's all anecdotal. I mean, so there's no promises. It's a vitamin, you know. And so if you are deficient in some vitamin, that can affect your health. And so there are people that take it and they say, man, I always felt amazing because you were deficient and now this thing is replacing your deficiency, right? So your lack of energy may be due to a vitamin deficiency, but it's not a prescribed, it's just a vitamin. You know, so if you compare that to the generic vitamin you have, it's way better because it has the stuff you need and doesn't have the stuff that puts you at an increased risk for things. Does that make sense? Sort of, kind of? So I'm not going to promise you anything, I guess is what I'm saying, and neither will the one-a-day people. But people take one a day and say, oh my God, I'm feeling better. You know what I'm saying, right? But that's because they're deficient in something. So we look at your diet. If you don't get have a wide-ranging diet that's full of fruits and vegetables and nuts and beans, then you might benefit, and that deficiency could drain your energy. Okay. All right, in the blue. Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, they're trustworthy for whoever's going to take them. Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, we have to say what is in our vitamin, and we had to send it to a neutral lab to say, if it says it's got 200 milligrams of vitamin C, our random capsule we tested as 200 milligrams. So whatever it says on the label, I would trust that what it says on the label is in there. But to the point I was making earlier, African Americans need 2,000 international units of vitamin D. So when you read the back of a vitamin bottle that's just off the shelf, it'll say it has 100% of the vitamin D you need, 600 international units. Who needs 600 international units? Exactly. So it's giving them 100% of what they need. You need 2,000 international units. Right? Because you don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, you need vitamin C. Because you don't eat enough beans and nuts, you need some zinc and magnesium. And that's how it was sort of designed.
Also, just quickly, piggyback on that, because we live in Cleveland, the lack of sun impacts us not having low vitamin D levels.
That's exactly true. And then, so most of us that are descendant of Africans come from equatorial Africa, right? 12 hours of sun, not this overcast sun we get, 12 hours year-round of sun. And so they measured the vitamin D levels in people from Chicago, and then Florida, and then South Africa, you know what I mean, or Nigeria, and they were able to see that their vitamin D levels are much closer to normal when you're where we're genetically sort of supposed to be. You know what I mean? And so us not being exposed to the amount of sun year round, and then we're descendants of African farmers. So where were they? Always outside. Not only, they weren't working in a factory in equatorial Africa, they were working outside. And so we're really not getting the vitamin D. So that's why if you're black, you need a vitamin D supplement. I'll come to you, then. Right. Yeah. It's terrible. And, you know, I watch people, and I'm in line at Dave's, you know, in my grocery cart, and people in front of me got juicy juices and high C juice. And I'm like, oh, my God. My head's just like, oh, my God. It's terrible. Yeah. A lot of sugar is definitely bad for you. Oh, over here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, and who's the BMI made for? Right, thank you. All right, so we kind of, the BMI is not good, not accurate really for African Americans or for Asian Americans, two ends of the spectrum, right? And so you might have a BMI of 28 and be perfectly fine when they might say you're overweight, right? And so I think some of that doesn't apply so much, and they're trying to come up with a better thing. And then with Asian Americans, they tend to be smaller and weigh less. The BMI kind of underestimates that. And so there are people with a BMI of an Asian American with a BMI of 28 probably has diabetes and all kinds of problems, and they're just still in the 20s. And so it's not accurate really across the board. Oh, over here? Yes. Yes. Yeah, well, I speak about, one of my talks is about unconscious bias, and when I'm speaking in December about bias in providers, in doctors and nurse practitioners and whatnot. It's a real thing, and it impacts how they make decisions. And unless you make people aware of their bias, you can't impact it, right? And so I tell this story about a guy. And every time I went in, when he came to see me, every time he'd have this black Steelers jersey on with a Steelers cap. And I'm like, even though they're killing me now, I'm just like a die-hard Browns fan. I mean, I don't ever miss a Browns game, right? And so when I open the door, I see the Steelers stuff, and it just, you know what I mean? And so he's been my patient, and that's just what he wore. And this is the funny part and sad part, too. And when I said, why do you wear that Steelers stuff? He's like, this is my nice outfit. I'm wearing my nice outfit for you. So how did that make me feel, right? He was dressing up. This was his go out. This is, he had a hat matching the jersey and all that. And so he was actually dressing up for me, even though it was grinding, immediately just ground against me when I would see that. And so I have a bias against people who smell. I have, if you smell, you don't get a really good visit from me. If your breath stinks, it's hard for me to stay in a room. I start to dry heave. Other things don't bother me. Wounds don't bother me. Ugly feet don't bother. So as long as you're aware of what bothers you and what affects your quality of care, you can adjust it. So I may review the person whose breath stinks record extra good before I go in, so I don't, normally I would do it live, in front of them, just to bypass it. So once you know what your biases are, then you can adjust. My nephew was over last night, and Kamala Harris can't do anything to please him. And I was like, you just don't want a woman, I'll do Obama. You don't want a woman to be president. That's the way he is, right? He said, no, that's not it, but I'm telling you that's it, right? And that's and he does not recognize that's his bias. He's just making up all kinds of stuff for why, he feels that way, when in reality, that's his bias. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like the doctors that say, I treat everyone the same. I treat all my patients the same. That's the worst person ever. Because he has no clue how he's discriminating against people. No clue, right? And so you try to arrange, everyone has bias. If you don't think you have a bias, you're the problem, right? And I tell doctors that you're the problem, people who don't think they have biases, right? And so it's important for me to talk to providers. All your providers have biases, and wherever their cultural biases can dictate how they feel about men, about women, about guys busting a sag. Thank God we're resolving out of that. If I see someone walk in busting a sag, I got to fix myself. You know what I'm saying? I got to fix my attitude, because I've met many of my patients doing that. And, oh my God, the smartest, most intelligent. Look what I'm thinking one thing, and I'm missing the value of this person because of some choice they made in how they wear their pants. You see what I'm saying? And so if you have to be aware of your biases so you can counter and say, oh yeah, I'm biased against this, but I'm not going to have it affect my care of this person. Sure. Right, and that's a lot of people have that experience. And so my message to you is to find someone you trust. Back to the electrician. Find a provider that you trust. Find someone that communicates to you in a way that you like to be communicated in. Now, if you're smoking and you're one of my patients, I'm going to try 5 different ways to get you to start smoking. I'm going to use the friendship way. I'm going to try to scare you with death. I'm going to scare you with have a stroke and live. I'm going to try different things. So they may not like one of them approaches. You know what I'm saying? And but at least I'm trying to communicate you in a way that I connect with you, and I don't really know how to do that. You know, so sometimes I'm trying things. Yes, sir.
First, I want to thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you.
And one of the things that I want to say, we have bias and things about where we live. For a long time, and still sometimes today, when I say I grew up in Mississippi, one of the next words will make people, how did you do it? Many times I come back to this state and people talk about me being segregated. And I saw more segregation in the city of Cleveland less than 2 months after I got here. Then some of you have didn't see it, and you've been here 15 years. So I just want to thank you for being open and talking about to understand that many things, first of all, is not developed for us. And we need to understand it was developed for the majority, just like politics today is breaking all the laws. They wasn't made for them, no, they were made for them. And thank God for people like you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's a good place to stop. I'm sweating up here. I appreciate you guys' attention, and I'll be here if you want to come ask me a question one-on-one. Thanks so much again.
Let's give Dr. Hall another round of applause. Amen? Amen. Amen. Gentlemen, we have been here since 10 o'clock this morning, some even earlier. I think we're ready to take our leave. Let's stand to our feet. Let's give Brother Brent a round of applause, our chair, Deacon Michael Parks, as well as the other co-chairs. I am reminded to inform you that for those who want to join us in the spirit of unity on tomorrow, the color is purple ties and black or shades of gray in terms of your suit. If you want to join the men and our leaders of our men's ministry on tomorrow, our men's choir will be wearing purple ties and shades of gray or black in our suit wear. So, Dr. Hall, we cannot thank you enough. We cannot thank you enough. Thank you and thank you, thank you. We are tremendously blessed to have him as an asset in our community, working with the Otis Moss Center and our Community Development Corporation, and we are actually going to be working with he and his team at UH to create more community programming to really penetrate into our community and our neighborhoods to do that. And so maybe look forward to having some of you be a part of that, of those think teams to really connect with our community, because you already heard and have seen just how much of an asset, but there are brothers who are not here who need to get this information, who are not connected to a church, not connected or affiliated, but we've got to get this message to them. And thank you again. Just again, anything, Deacon Brent, anything we need to be mindful of, brother? We're good? We are good. We are good. Have we been blessed today, brothers? Have we been blessed today? Amen. So 10:30 a.m. on tomorrow, our service, our men will be singing, our brothers will be ushering. Dr. Brawley, who is in the air right now, will be preaching, and we're just looking forward to having a tremendous time in the Lord. Let's go before the Lord. Lord, we thank you for how you have blessed us, and thank you for how you have so richly encouraged us, God. We thank you for this worship this morning. The spirit of praise and the spirit of exaltation was rich and deep, and it provided a deep salve for our souls, and it just so enrichedly blessed us, and we thank you for that. We thank you, oh God, for the brothers who came out and were just willing to just come out and just plant themselves here for these hours of time, oh God, to be strengthened spiritually, physically, through our food, our lunch, and our fellowship. And we thank you for this time, oh God. We thank you for this time with Dr. Hall, God, that his message, oh God, was historical, cultural. Lord, it was important for both our minds, our body, our souls, and our wellness, not only for us as individuals, but as members of our community, our family, and this society. May we be able to be deputized messengers of his message, oh God, taking it out into the community and creating opportunities for this message to get far and wide. So as our brother said, we can continue to see these trends going down. God, give us safe passage to our varying destinations until we see each other again. May your grace and your mercy ever lead us and guide us. In Christ's precious name, amen. Amen. Remember, Dr. Hall said he would remain if you had any some additional questions. So let's take advantage of that. Amen. Good to see you.